comment? Okay, no public comment. We'll move on to the second. If anyone knows me, you'll know I like to run a very efficient meeting. So I will be keeping anyone on task here so we can get through this and get you all on with your day. So if I'm going too fast, please feel free to slow me down. We have a report from Rob. You want to kick it off, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to put this in your wheelhouse, Mike, we've made every attempt here to try to make this meeting the shortest meeting that we can remember in 3 years, because this is following up on maybe the longest meeting we had in the 3 years I've been here. The last meeting, which included the extra hour, yes, a full hour of executive session. So it was a 3-hour meeting last time. So this one is scheduled or arranged to be a 1-hour meeting, hopefully. And you know, if we like this, then we'll try to keep moving forward with an hour, hour and a half, and try to keep our outside speakers to a minimum and have them very valuable. This agenda actually does not have any outside speakers because of some of the other topics we wanted to discuss, and frankly, we just wanted to get in and out in an hour. There really wasn't any need for anything else at this point in time. But as always, we always take suggestions for speakers from the outside. If you want to hear from DOT, you want to hear from anybody else in the state, OPM, comptroller's office, anybody, just let me know, and I will make the necessary arrangements to try to get somebody from the state, or anybody else for that matter, at one of our board meetings. So again, if you have a question, concern, interest, please reach out, and we'll do the legwork. I attached, as always, the meeting activity since the last meeting, so it's all there for you. It was part of the agenda package without getting into any details there. Nothing that really stands out of any further detail, but if anybody has any questions on any of that, feel free to ask those questions or reach out at any other time. And a couple other things. I've been bringing up the audit, the year-end audit for fiscal year 23. This would be last fiscal year. And we are now under our 4th extension, and I've been assured that the auditors, King, it's actually the final product is in internal review as we speak. And so I anticipate that the final audit should be arriving in the inbox maybe as early as next week, maybe you know, as soon as I receive that audit, I will circulate that out to the board for your review as soon as I get that, so you have plenty of time to digest it.
Rob,
And
what was the big holdup this year with the audit?
well, it was just a combination of factors. I mean, number one, you know, we were a little bit behind. Sorry, we were a little bit behind as far as scheduling the audit with the transition and some of the the way we designed the new budget, trying to make some of the financial transitions that really kind of didn't really work with our QuickBooks Online, you know, trying to fit square pegs in round holes and things of that nature, which, you know, obviously I've talked about before with our monthly financial statements. And we'll go over a little bit of this in our budget presentation. But you know, it was a little bit of that kind of started it. And then there was just you know, I think that there were a couple of things that came together at the same time with the auditors themselves trying to schedule things. It's just one of those things that just keeps getting kicked down the road over time for various reasons. And but there's been work being done on it since, I believe, February, maybe even into January. So a little bit of back and forth, two-way street. In an ideal world, we will be hopefully embarking on our next audit preparation audit for this current fiscal year in August. So it's only a few short months away. And also, I think we may actually entertain this summer potentially going out for an RFP. We haven't done that in quite some time, and I think it's a good practice to kind of go out occasionally and do an RFP for audit services just to see what the landscape provides. So we may do that as well too. So, but we want to get a jump start on this fiscal year as soon as we possibly can, so we're not in this boat next year. But just a number of things, Mike.
I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure when the last time the COG went out to bid, but I think
Yeah.
that, you know, quite honestly, we should do an RFP every 3 to 4 years looking for audit proposals.
Yeah, I agree. I think you need to kind of pick your head up and look around every once in a while, periodically on like a 3 to 5 year basis. Outside of that, I wanted to provide a warm welcome to Winchester's newest town manager, Paul Harrington, who I do see was on the call somewhere here, somewhere on the list. I don't know if can hear that.
I'm
If he
here.
wants to.
Yeah, Rob,
He's
I'm
there, he's
here.
waving.
Hi, everybody. Very much looking forward to working with all of you and excited to be in my new role. Todd, actually, I'm looking at his background on his screen. Our mayor, he's in outer space right now. I guess he's overjoyed.
So Paul comes comes to us from what, Windsor Locks?
Windsor Locks, yes.
10 years.
Just over 10, yeah.
Wow. And I used to work in Windsor Locks before he got there as a planning person over there. So, but Paul actually has a lot of great experience with MSW and Mira. So we definitely look forward to tapping his wisdom and experience there. So we've already had some preliminary conversations, Rista and I, with Paul in his office. Was it last week, I believe?
Yeah, I sit on Mira Dissolution Board and I chair the Finance Committee on the Mira Dissolution Authority. So never knew I'd know as much about garbage as I do, but I do.
He may be a reluctant expert, but he's an expert now with Mira.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
well, welcome aboard, Paul.
Thank you. No, excited to be
We're
here.
happy to have you. Outside that, I think there was one other update that we didn't have on the agenda. And I don't know if I was talking to Casey or Rista or somebody, or Gene. Did somebody else still remind me what that was? Besides the household hazardous waste event that's going to be on the beginning of June.
Yeah, so we sent out the household hazardous waste to all of you all, and have gotten one or maybe two emails back from other parties who are involved in that in each of your towns, sort of lamenting a bit that they didn't personally receive that email. So we just wanted to check in with you all to just to find out, do you want us to try to figure out who all those people are, or can we rely on you to make sure that those emails get forwarded to the right folks?
Yeah, so I guess I don't know if it's a rhetorical question, but yes, we're always faced with the same dilemma, which is how to disseminate information to the right people. And sometimes we don't know who the right people are, or maybe the right people have changed over and we just don't know that. So usually what we like to do is just disseminate the information either through the chief elected officials or potentially through the town clerks, or both. So the big question is that still a acceptable practice, or should we start populating other lists? It's a question maybe we can't answer right now, but we do have occasionally people reaching out saying, hey, I didn't get this information, and we don't know that. We just assume that it's getting distributed accordingly. So we take any suggestions. Is that the only thing?
I think that's, what's that? All three of yours, right?
Yeah, I think that was the only updates that we had, and just to keep moving. It's already 10:15, and I know we want to have a good discussion with the budget. So I think that'll wrap it up. If anybody has any questions for me,
We do. So let's, if it's all right with everyone, we'll move on to the budget. I want to first say that I got a chance to review this budget already, and I want to commend Rista and Rob for their hard work and getting. This is probably the most in-depth budget we've ever gotten from the COG. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and because I'm sure there'll be questions and a lot to digest here. Yeah,
and I'll just start it off. This is driven mostly by Rista. She finished the SEDS process, and that's sitting in as far as I understand at this point, it's sitting with the EDA, and we're still waiting to hear back on the approval on that plan. So she obviously switched gears and was helping us out with some of our budgetary monitoring and planning, and has taken some initiative and done an incredibly remarkable job putting together all of the details that we have in our budget, and frankly putting it in a different way of looking at it, so that because basically in a nutshell, what you used to see, going back 3 years plus, is that you'd only see the operating budget side of the COG itself. You know, basically what the revenue sources coming into the COG would be attributed to, you know, salaries, payroll, and the work that the COG itself was doing as an organization, not necessarily what was coming into the COG and going through the COG through pass through and things of that nature. So it was kind of like opening a window into a bigger home, and you only saw through that one window. So in this sense, what we try to do here is provide a really granular level of detail so that you can see pretty much in a different way, looking at it in a different way, and trying to kind of streamline some of the areas, our spending areas, instead of having things grouped into one bucket that may not be appropriate. We've moved things out of the buckets and kind of moved them into areas that make more sense and also align more with our QuickBooks accounting software and you know, basically how we want to set up our chart of accounts. So what this will do is this will lead into a better framework when we move into the fiscal year July 1, with our monthly financial statements actually reflecting more of exactly how we operate, so that it makes more sense. Because right now, when you look at them, you'll see lines that are just that are, you know, that just don't reflect exactly how things are really moving through the COG, and it's because we're just trying to work with what we have, because it just doesn't fit. So anyways, so it's a very granular level, and we presented this to the executive committee the other day, and we took a little bit of feedback there and provided some more descriptive, you know, memo basically that was provided for you in your packet to kind of explain things. We'll walk through it, and of course we'll try to package this up a little bit neater for the final budget approval once we have consensus. But basically, we'll just walk through this, and it'll also show a little bit about the work plan and projects that we're going to be you know, focusing on for this next fiscal year. So it's kind of basically a walk in the park here to see as far as how we are going to operate. So with all that said, I'll just turn it over to Rista, and she can share her screen, I'm assuming. If not, I can, and she can kind of walk you through step by step on how we kind of set this up, so you can understand a little bit better about, you know, what we do and how we do it.
So good morning. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So as Rob said, I think with any good budget, we need to have it be relevant to a work plan that we can then manage and show progress, and, you know, make sure that our priorities are funded. And when I say our priorities, I mean the board's priorities, and making sure that as COG staff, our priorities are aligned with the board's priorities. So the first thing where I want to start is I want to make sure that we have a good understanding of our revenues. And I'll back up just a second here. The purpose of today's presentation is to give you an outline as to how to read the budget and kind of the rationale behind some of the changes. I think that if we want to get into a deeper dive as to, you know, what are we funding, what are the programs that we want to fund, to what level, you know, how do some of these grants work, I would offer a special meeting between now and the next meeting to really just discuss the budget, do a deep dive into the details of the programs and the projects and the funding that we're proposing. Today is really just kind of a more high level. Here's where the changes are, here's how to read it. Of course, I'm open to any conversation that you want to have, and we can provide any of the backup information that you would like. But just to know, we don't have to do it all today. We wanted to share it with you with enough time to have a special meeting if we so choose. So digging right in, I wanted to start with talking about the revenues. In the past, you've heard a lot about pass-through revenues. And in some sense, they are pass-through. We get a grant and then we hire consultants, or we, you know, the money goes to other sub-recipients. But a lot of work here at the COG goes into those grants. We manage the program in a lot of cases, the fiscal agent, the reporting, the work that goes around that. So instead of calling them pass-through grants, I think it's more appropriate to call them grants and special projects. And I'm starting at the bottom of this page. These are all of the grants that we currently have open or that we're expecting to receive. A lot of these are annual grants that come to us. Sometimes we don't know the exact funding amount because it's state and federal timelines, but we have a good idea of what we should expect. So you'll see some of these are estimated, some of these grants are expected but not yet awarded. And this is the total grant amount. My intention is next year to say, here's the total grant amount, here's how much is spent, here's what's remaining. But because we're kind of changing this, I can't clearly do that for this year. So just know that these are the total grant amounts that may go over multiple fiscal years, and are very specific to a project or work that is being done. Because these do involve a lot of work, many of them provide for some kind of administrative revenue that goes to the COG. We hear about this as a fiscal agent fee or administrative fee or indirect cost, whatever it is by the grant. Those are in this next box up. These are the revenues that we're expected to receive based on the work we've done with the grants below. Because they go over multiple fiscal years, we may not receive all of these revenues in one fiscal year. So what I've tried to demonstrate here is the total that we'll receive in administrative revenues, if there's any amounts previously received, and what we're expecting for this year. So Demis is a really good example. We have 3 and expecting a 4th Demis award to be open. These run over 2 to 3 years, which is dictated by FEMA. And so when we get work funding as a COG to help with the program administration and also fiscal agent funding. And so these are the total. You'll see it does not necessarily match what we're expected for this year. And that's because we know we won't get it all in the same year. And this is, again, estimated what we believe will accomplish in 1 year and the revenues that will come to us. So up on top is really the funding sources that are aligned with our fiscal year and that we're allowed to use for operations and that are primarily operational funding. Some of them do have programs and projects involved into them, and you'll see that further down the budget conversation, but these funding sources are primarily operational. Our UPWP, which is our DOT funding, is a 2-year commitment. And we can, we have a budget, but this year 1, we are underspent. So you'll see I kind of broke that into 2 lines so we can understand what that is. The RSG grant, which was significantly increased last year. Our HRSA grant, which is a 3-year commitment, but we have a budget for every year. Our EDA partnership, again, another 3-year commitment, but it's a $60,000 budget every year. We do get some interest income that we need to account for, and then our municipal dues. Those are our primary operational funding that we have committed for this fiscal year, and we know that we will tap into for this fiscal year. So to talk about grants and special projects just a little bit more.
Krista?
Yep.
Sorry, it's Paul. Can we back up onto that first section when we talk about interest income? I'm assuming, and of course I'm the new guy here, but one of the areas that I quickly found when I came up to this town is in the current year budget that's going to end June 30th. Last year, the board, the town manager predicted that there would be $60,000 in interest income. We pulled the number. I thought it was going to be 520,000. It was actually 540,000. Is there any room to bump up that interest income? I think a lot of agencies are probably underplaying that number just based on, where rates are right now. Nobody has that crystal ball. I would nowhere suggest budget what you got this year because nobody has that crystal ball. But I'm assuming that interest income is going to be any money that we have in the bank. Is that correct?
So we do have a few CDs and stiff, and that does not include those. Those go right into that balance. This is the interest, my understanding that how we book it is that this is the interest we're receiving on a monthly period from our like bank accounts.
So the stiff interest, we actually just put into the stiff account. Are we accounting for it?
We get, and I'll have to check with our accountant. We
Okay.
get financial reports, and every month you see the increase in the deposits.
Okay.
They're not necessarily performing to the level we want, and that's a different conversation that we plan to have in the upcoming months about where do we put the CDs that we have. And I can find out exactly what this interest income is accounted for in our profit and loss statement. We've been around between $4,000 and $7,000 for the past few years in this line item. That's directly in our P&L statement. So that's where I came up with the 5,000. But I can get some more information on exactly where this comes from.
Yeah, and on that note, I can say we've talked about internally, our CDs, have typically rolled over, and in this environment right now, that may not be the best decision. So I think we've also talked about having an internal financial policy. And I think with some greater focus and efforts, we could probably maximize our investments and how we're handling our financial asset policy. So
That
it's
sounds
something.
good. There's money to be had right now. I mean,
Yeah.
and we can definitely,
Yeah.
do more if we, invest money wisely. So, okay.
And keeping it liquid for the COG, I think, is essential. So I think something like a stiff, and even
Yep.
the town itself, we just shifted all of our regular everyday funds to sweep accounts, and we're earning 4.25% on those. So in 1 month, we earned $18,000 on just one account. So I think we could definitely maximize it and keep it liquid. So I think it's a great idea, Paul. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now you know where my background is. It's in the finance section for sure. So
We're going to get along just fine, Paul.
I think if you've got CDs that are old, and I mean, it makes sense to just cancel them, take the penalty, which is going to be insignificant, and move on. That 5,000, I agree, looks extremely low.
Yeah, not in today's market. I mean, who knows what the future is going to predict. But all right, because you want to keep it an hour, but if you need me, count me in for anything to do with financing.
Sure, and I think that's a good point to bring up. Okay, so just moving on to, I just want to touch basically quick on this grants and special programs expenses. Most of this is just for informational purposes only. These grants are pretty specific to what we can spend. They're overseen by either other committees, other boards that are looking at some of this funding source. There will be some room for input from the COG board as we get into the implementation of some of these, specifically the FTA. What does this transit planning look like? What are the needs? And we'll work with the stakeholders in the COG board to develop that scope of work. But in general, this is informational for you to know, where this funding is dedicated and what the grant requirements tell us we have to do with that. So where I want to spend our time is in this operating budget, because this is where you have the most discretion and what we want to do and what we want to spend our money on. So over here on this is just a summary. Over here
Krista,
on the
can you
left.
share your screen again? Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, you stopped. Yeah, just because it's easier. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know that it stopped. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. So over here on the left are, again, the sources. You see that we have the same sources as we did in the operating budget and the revenue. Here's our admin revenues that we're expecting for this year. And then we have a carryover amount. What we're expecting, portions of what we're expecting to not spend this year to come over. This is a historic term that we've used for carryover from the previous fiscal years. There's a couple different ways we can look at this, whether, you know, we draw it off of our savings or general fund, but I stuck with what we have historically done and called from it. So we'll keep that the same. But before I get too much into what these numbers kind of mean, I think it's important to look at where have we been and what have we been doing. And this is a lot of numbers, and it's, you know, it's the best way that I found to try to tell you the story of why we're doing some of the changes that we're doing. So over here in this left-hand column is fiscal year 22-23, what we actually spent. This next column in pink is the budget of 23-24, and then the change. And you will see there was a lot of growth in this budget versus last year. We increased the budget by 26%. Most of that was in salaries. We anticipated 7 full-time employees. And we were able to make this because we got more RSG funding. So there was no increase in municipal dues, but it was really right in line with the RSG funding that we were receiving.
And DOT.
And DOT funding, right. And it's also important to note that within this, we also had projected $63,000 of unobligated funds. So our revenues were higher, anticipated to be higher than what we had budgeted, but this was the budget. So then I wanted to compare kind of where are we to date. So this is as of 5/1, so we still have 2 months of expenses to go. But you'll see we're over budget in some, under budget in others, and mostly in the salary and benefits line item, we're under budget. And that's because we have 6 full-time employees, not 7, and our staff was hired later in the year. Jean's position came in December. I started in November, so there was a 45-day gap in my position between Emily and I, which is really why we're seeing this this being underspent. And then what are we proposing? Compared to last budget, we are proposing to stick with, you know, 6 full-time employees, and there are some changes here. Now you'll see some of these numbers are really big increases, the dues and subscriptions and travel and conference. Generally, these will be lumped into overhead, but I did break this out into our summary sheet just so I could go over why we're seeing this big increase here. While we're on this page, I wanted to talk a little bit about carryover, because you see this big $781,000 that is underspent from the budget. That is not necessarily all revenues we've received that were underspent. Part of the, I don't want to say problem, but part of the lack of transparency in the previous grant is this contractual line item. I believe that this was mostly funding from Demis that we were expecting to receive but didn't spend yet, which means we didn't get the revenues yet. So we're gonna just, for now, leave that aside, not count that as unspent revenues. And we're gonna look at basically the salaries in the fringe. So if you add that up, what we're expected to still spend for the next 2 months, we have a balance of $297,000. A lot of that will be DOT funding that we haven't received revenues yet for. So we want to subtract that from that total. Then we have some underspent and some more expenses coming up. So we have to use, you know, about $86,000, which leaves us somewhere in the range of $96,000. This is fairly conservative, but I'm also looking at this in a very conservative way. When I go back to the summary sheet, you will see I'm only proposing that we carry $28,000 over, just because I want to make sure that we don't exceed the revenues that we've received to carry over, even though our expenses are much less. But this is a from what I can gather, fairly accurate estimate. So just to go back to the summary sheet for context now, you see our salaries that are broken into 3 grants will pay for salaries: the RSG, DOT funding, and the HRSA grant. Our fringe and benefit is also paid for by those 3 line items. Overhead is split up. RSG does pay for quite a bit of it. DOT gives us a 1 lump sum for benefits, fringe, and overhead. There's no breaking that into fringe and benefit versus overhead, so you'll see it's all lumped into benefit and fringe, and nothing in overhead. HRSA does break out what is an indirect expense and what is a benefit and fringe, so we were able to break that down. Then the rest kind of falls into the municipal dues bucket. Dues and subscriptions are broken in. This is an increase in what we've paid in this line item historically, but not necessarily an increase to the budget. You'll see when we get to overhead, everything that's been billed to this line item in previous years has been dues only. Most of our subscriptions are billed to our utility telephone line, and that's not necessarily easy for us to track or the right place to bill it. So I've pulled out all of those expenses from a utility line item, and you'll see it's about $5,000 less this year than previous years, and put it into the proper place. And I can go through the details of what this number includes. Travel and conference too, there is an increase here, but it's not as big as you might see at initial blush. A lot of these expenses in previous years have been billed to grants and billed as a project in the grant, not as a travel expense to the grant. So we're trying to adjust that. This includes a lot of things. This includes our mileage. This includes our professional development. This includes any conferences that we might go to, or workshops throughout the state. And this is for all 6 employees. We are increasing this a bit from previous years because we want to make sure we have enough funding to increase our capacity with GIS training, and that we are out there where we need to be at the state level, promoting our region and promoting our communities and bringing important information back to you about state and federal initiatives that are going on. This project and programs line item is different than the special grants and programs. This is where we have some discretion for the most part of what we want to spend here. And I broke this into some detail that we'll go through in a minute. And then contingency. This is a number that I picked. This number, I try to use some different logic, but where this came from, we're historically between $10,000 and $17,000 in contingency, so this is right in the middle. This year, our contingency was high, and our miscellaneous expenses were high, and those are really related to the move, the office move. The previous year, we had $17,000 in contingencies, so that's where we came from on this, and you know, that's up for discussion as well. So I'm going to keep moving, but if you have anything you want to stop me, just, you know, let me know. So I wanted to just jump into where some of the changes in overhead are. So audit and fiscal services, you'll see there is a change there. And that is because we've now added My Office LLC to do our bookkeeping and accounting for us. We're historically in previous years, this was just our auditing services. Now this includes the auditing plus My Office LLC. This will be the first full fiscal year of that service. Bonds and property insurance, where we budget for it up here. This is one of the crazy things. When we put it into our chart of accounts, we put it down into insurance expense and cyber expense. So I've just readjusted the budget from this, instead of being up here, is down in here. This is important because what our goal is once this budget is approved, we want to enter it into QuickBooks. And we want to enter it into the right line item so that every month or quarter, when we give you financial reports, it's a QuickBooks report and you can compare the exact line item that was approved versus the expense that has been to that line item. So that's the adjustment.
Yeah, if I could just jump in real quick right there on that point, Rista, so traditionally, even before all of us are here, going back to the previous administration, your monthly financial reports were basically manually interpreted data coming from QuickBooks and other sources. So it was basically a person had to manipulate what they were gathering for data and put it together for you to be able to review. We want to get away from that because of various reasons. First and foremost, because of the potential for human error, and also to make things a lot more easy and efficient and more transparent. So that was it.
Okay, so you'll see our rent goes up. That's our contractual agreement. But in this budget, we don't need to budget the $6,000 for utilities because we no longer have electric and propane expense. This telephone, we do have still telephone expense, but we do not have Wi-Fi expense that's covered in our rent. And this change right here is mostly because of all those subscriptions were being billed to this line item, and now we've pulled them out of there. So you'll see that's a pretty big change. In the services, we no longer need cleaning and MSW disposal services. And the other big change to point out is in paychecks, we're going from just over $12,000 to $3,000. That's because we've reduced, or we've now eliminated the HR services that were connected with paychecks. Rob just wasn't finding the value in that he wanted. So we removed it from there, but we did add a line item for human resource service or consulting service, which is about the same as what we were spending on paychecks, so that we can get that technical assistance when and if we need it throughout the year.
And also on that note as well, if I could jump in again, we are actually currently looking into paychecks and potentially ending our relationship with paychecks altogether and having my office LLC handle our payroll services. So that's an ongoing discussion right now, just to inform everybody.
Yep, and then you'll see, last budget, we had $5,000 budgeted for the contingency. We spent 37. This year, we're increasing that to 15,000. So that's just a summary of some of the changes in our overhead. When we get to dues and subscriptions, you'll see, these are the organizations that we belong to or are proposing to belong to. Some of it is paid for by different grants. And then these are the subscriptions that we're now pulling out. And the reason this is important is I'm going to, our Microsoft Office 365, which is $3,000, that's due in May. So we go all year without getting that bill. And if we don't, know to look or remember, we might think that we have underspent our line items when in fact, this is a pretty big expense toward the end of the year. So we want to make sure we really identified what we're spending, where we're coming up with this number, and we can go back and look and say, yes, we've paid these, we haven't paid these, and figure out where we are. And then lastly, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about these projects and consultants that are built into our operating budget. So I broke these down by the funding opportunities. RSG, we have about, after we've paid for our salaries and our dues and our overhead, we have $500 left for some kind of programming. It's not a ton of money, but I thought that it might be best put to use, making sure that we have land use training for our planning and zoning commissioners, which is now required. We do a lot of this on Fifth Thursdays, which we try to put on at no cost, but there are some technical requirements that we would hope to get into. And if we do need to bring in an attorney or a professional to speak to our commissioners or have an in-person meeting and we wanted to reserve a space or provide refreshments, this allows us to do that within the RSG grant. The DOT funding, we are proposing after salaries and benefits, that we'll have about $151,000, and this will vary slightly based on where we land this year and close out the year, but generally around $150,000. And what we really want to focus on, and Casey can get into this into her transportation plan, but we really want to update our safety plan. We want to make sure we have updated transportation plan. This is important to make sure that we can access federal funding that's out there right now. A lot of you are familiar with the Safe Streets for All and some of the other infrastructure bills. So having these updated plans, make sure we have access to that. And then with the remaining funding, any kind of planning we can do to get projects ready for implementation is where we will focus. Our plans are fairly up to date. There's a lot of good information in there. We don't think they're going to cost absorbent amounts of money. We can do a lot of it in-house, but generally this 150,000 is going to be broken into these three categories. That money does require a 10% local match. So the 16,788 you will see in the municipal dues programs bucket. The HRSA grant, these are really prescribed already by the grants. We have very little say over how these get spent. This is what it was approved by the grant, but because HRSA money is a big source of our operational funds, they show up here and not in the special grants program. EDA allows us for implementation of our SEDS, which, as you know, we just recently approved. And then the other revenues, and I'll bring that in to talk about these together, because where the EDA grant, I have, proposing that we implement the Discover Litchfield Hills and our tourism marketing plan. We need to develop that marketing plan first. And what I'm proposing here is that we use some of our other revenues, which are the municipal dues, admin revenues, carryover interest, to develop that marketing strategy. The reason that I'm suggesting this is we have access to this funding much earlier and quicker than we will to the EDA funding. So if we can get this started and moving, we'll be able to get to the implementation quicker. We've talked a little bit about economic gardening. This is where we can get into a different meeting to some more details of what would be included in these. But if we want to build capacity to bring this program to the region, it's $1,600. And then the program itself, implementation, is $23,500. Again, split between the two different funding sources. I did provide an economic development director's update, and I included some information about this Invest in Northwest campaign. I think would be very important. So I'm putting a budget in here for that. We talked about supporting having outdoor recreation support our local businesses and our economy. So it's really more of an outdoor economy. And through the SEDS process, there was an initiative to develop some signage that can be at trailheads that help inform people best stewardship for the resource, but also direct them to village centers and to our local businesses. And so what would that design manual look like? And then having business workshops and conferences. You can see we're trying to bring in a Northwest tourism conference with the state. We've done economic development summits in the past. We've done some manufacturing support. So kind of built into that some workshops. And the other revenues, the ones I have not talked about, is Connecticut Main Street. And the next agenda item, I'll get into some more details as to what that is, and hopefully we can move forward currently on that. And again, with our marketing, Discover Litchfield Hills has a new rollout of their calendar where businesses can just put their event on their own personal calendar, and it would update to all of the Discover Litchfield Hills network of websites. And if we wanted to help businesses get that up and running, that's what this funding is for. And then, MSW is a big topic, and we believe that we'll need legal and technical assistance to get through the process. So we've put about $50,000 aside. So that's, I talked a lot. I'm gonna go back to the summary sheet just for context, and I'm gonna open it up to anybody who wants to ask questions or needs clarification.
Just really quick, folks, we're at 10:51 right now, and I want to thank Rista for all the detail. We do have a lot of other agenda items. I would like to open the floor for a motion to have a breakout meeting for budget only. And if that's appropriate, we can ask all of our questions at that time, and we can have Rob coordinate that, Rob and Rista coordinate that for people that need more detail or maybe have more questions, if that's acceptable by the membership.
Mike, I'll make that motion. This is Eleanor.
I'll second that.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Great. Look forward to that breakout session. I think it's important for I'll encourage a lot of the new CEOs to please get involved and come to the breakout session because I think there's a lot more to be shared there. So,
Mike, who was the second on that?
And Todd.
Looked like Todd.
Okay, and you've got hand up, Matt, this stuff.
Matt, you have anything?
I think Matt was just voting affirmative.
Oh, for it. Yeah,
Oh,
I think
just
so.
voting.
All right, we'll move on to item 4, community economic development, Rista. We don't have 10 minutes, so I'm
No,
hoping
no,
you can
I'll
wrap
be
it up.
super quick. So I did provide a pretty detailed written update, so that's for you. I wanted to provide it at the same meeting as this budget because a lot of the things in the budget are further explained here. The one that I really just wanted to get some support on is the support Main Streets and Village Centers. I shared a scope of work that was prepared with Connecticut Main Street. It's a lot of work for, I think, a very reasonable price that will help move forward any of the 21 towns, any and all of the 21 towns that have a downtown Main Street or Village Center that they would like to see expanded. The purpose of this is not to tell the towns, hey, you need to do this, but to develop a plan that we can then go to either EDA or RPIP funding and get some funding to implement a more regional plan to support all of our downtowns. So if you are comfortable with the written scope or would like me to give more detail, if we could approve this scope and the funding of $12,450, which we do have available in this fiscal year, that we can get the work started when the weather is nice in spring and get these downtown assessments started. I'm happy to get into more detail, but due to time, I'll stop there and get your feedback.
Mike, I popped a possible motion into the chat.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Jean's going to help us out with writing the motions up for us ahead of time, just so that we have them to consider. If someone would like to make that motion.
I'll make the motion. Again, it's Eleanor. But do we need to add that to the agenda before we make that motion? Or is that necessary? Am I getting hung up?
It's on there. Community Economic Development Update, recommended action item number 4.
Got it.
Approved
Okay.
scope of work for Connecticut Main Street Center.
All right, I'll move it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Great.
Catherine, you're up with the STIP amendments, project number 01703731, funding for the continuation of the statewide Connecticut Rides program, utilizing congestion mitigation and air quality funding. And 00670123 amendment is to move funding from 2024 to outer year for CON of a streetscape project of pedestrian improvements within Kent Village.
And if I may add, Selectman Chris, we do have one other amendment that is not on the agenda. Received it from the DOT, and if we could actually include that with regards to replacement of traffic control signals at various locations statewide. It is a total of a $6.1 million project, and I had requested from the DOT as far as locations within our region, and those do include two in New Hartford and one in Winchester, and I could provide those locations, but for the sake of having this endorsed at this meeting so that they can move forward at the DOT, I didn't want to have to hold it up any further. So I'm also looking for endorsement of project 0174-0448 for the replacement of traffic control signals.
Casey,
Okay,
can you
we-
say that project number again?
It's 0174-0448.
Can we have a motion to just add that amendment to the agenda?
Ready
to go.
So moved.
Thank you so
Second.
much.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. So considering that we have 3 amendments under the transportation and planning to consider, does anyone have any further questions on any of these projects, or is someone ready to make a motion?
Move to
Anybody
approve.
want- Jim Britton, move to approve. Do we have a second? Curtis, second. Any other further discussion? All those in favor to move all 3 amendments, say aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. I guess I'm up again. Legislative
Mi-
Committee, if you're not
excuse
tired of
me,
hearing my
Mike?
voice yet.
Mike,
Yep.
just before you get off transportation updates, I know Casey sent out an email to all the CEOs for the TA program. That's the solicitation is currently open for the next, it's a 5-year solicitation. We haven't heard anything back from anybody. So if you are interested, call Casey and just even have a conversation with a project that you think you might be interested in, so we can get it on the next June meeting to make that deadline. And I just wanted to just make that reminder.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
Sorry. Sorry, can I jump in? Just on that note for the TA, this is Kevin Tedesco from the DOT. We are likely going to be issuing a 1-month extension. So the June, so just, that'll all be coming, but you've got a little bit more time.
Great, thank you. With that said, legislatively, as you know, the session ended last night. I can tell you, I called it quits at about 1:30 of making all my phone calls and talking to people. I'm not going to bore everyone with all the details. I have over 100 different results for bills here. But the 2 big ones, I think the desegregate bills died, which is great for all of us. Keeps zoning control in our hands. The other one was the motor vehicle tax. It did pass the Senate. That was the 5172 bill, which had an amendment to it that basically said that towns can opt in to phase out motor vehicle taxes while adjusting personal property taxes going forward. And then basically it tied it to a funding source, which means that towns that did opt in would have higher consideration for outside funding than towns that did not opt in. As you know, cost and CCM, a lot of the towns were against this as a whole, whether it's an opt-in or not. There are some mechanisms in the bill that would have helped motor vehicle tax in general, but the end result was it made it to the House floor and it died right there on the vine. Rumor has it that there might be a special session this year to take up some of these bills and try to skip some of these through. So don't breathe a full sigh of relief right now. But let's try to keep as positive as we can about it. I know some of the bills with shared services and stuff, unfortunately, those failed. And there were a couple others that failed as well. But I will send out a quick summary of where I think all the bills are. We won't have a finalization until sometime probably later today, early tomorrow morning, till I have everything updated. So I'll probably try to hold on sending it so I can get some sort of full update to all of you as well. As you all know, the OSHA bill died, never even went up for a vote, which I know that made Todd very happy and made me very happy. So I think that overall, there were some wins here. There are some losses, but minimal at best, I believe. So if there's no questions for me, we can move on to Demus John Field. You've got no time.
Oh, thanks, Mike. That's okay. Real quick. Just June 12th, guys, put it on your calendar. That's the this year's the governor's exercise, the annual exercise that's being held. There's 2 sessions, one during the day and one at night. So please, I sent out a memo last week with all the registration information to make sure your towns participate. And then the other thing is, there's a lot of stuff going on with grants right at the moment, especially EMPG. I'll mention that. There's the pool funding, applications are due by May 15th, I believe it is. So please get those in. LEOP, grant process, make sure you, get your $5,000 for doing the, LEOPs, and then obviously the normal EMPG stuff. And then the other thing, Homeland Security grant funding, if you haven't done your MOAs, please do so and send them off to Sarah. But I've also supplied a written detailed report. So I think that's all I have, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks, John. If anyone has any further questions, like to reach out to John. John's a great resource and can help you with just about anything, I think. So we appreciate you, John, very much. Number 8, administrative items. A, approve the April 4th meeting minutes. We could
So
probably
moved.
take motion made, seconded,
Second, this is Matt.
second by Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
This is
So
Paul
moved.
Harrington. Todd's away, so I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't at that meeting.
Okay. We won't hold it against you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Action on the approval of the monthly financial statements for March.
Also in the chat.
Do we have someone to make that motion out of the chat?
So moved.
Curtis,
Matt
second.
moved it. Curtis seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Approval of the recommended regional engineering service providers.
So moved.
That was moved by Curtis.
Second, Matt.
Second by Matt. Second by Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Correspondence. I'm sorry, recommendation for Northwest Hill COG officers and executive committee for fiscal year 24-25 and floor nominations to be received. The slate of officers shall be approved at the June annual meeting per the Northwest Hill COG's bylaws. The nominating committee is Todd, Dan, Denise, and Gordon. Do we have the recommendations? Todd, Denise, or Gordon? Anybody on that can give us
So moved.
recommendations? Or Rob, do we have the recommendations?
I do not.
Are there
Wait.
any nominations from the floor that should be considered, or should we just wait till the June meeting then?
This is Matt. I'll move it to the June meeting.
Okay, move to the June meeting by Matt for vote.
Second.
Seconded.
I'm not sure if you actually need a motion for that, because it says in the agenda that it
Okay.
will be approved at the June
That'll be
meeting.
approved at the June meeting.
I
Okay,
think we're good.
no motion. Thank you, gentlemen. Correspondence, Torrington Urban Forestry Equity Grant support letter. Do we have a motion to approve the letter?
Curtis.
Curtis moves.
Denise will second.
Denise will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Again, correspondence, Winston Housing and Advanced Marker Space, Community Investment Fund, Northwest Hills COG support letter, attachment H. Do we have a motion to move that support letter?
So moved.
Motion made. Do we have a second?
Denise will second.
Denise will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mike,
Can I say one thing, Mike?
Sure.
Just keep it on the radar that some of the towns have been asked. We all have, hopefully from Dan and maybe myself, to get your town administrations lined up to at least continue to support looking at a public solution to the Mira dissolution. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
And Curtis, we have some information that we've been working on pulling together for you here, and we should be sharing that shortly.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we had a motion made and seconded to adjourn. Do we have all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you. Sorry
Thank
for
you.
keeping 6 minutes over, folks.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.